viewers, welcome back. It's still 95.1 Nigeria Info. Like I told you, we will be talking about World Press Freedom Day. The United Nations General Assembly declared May 3rd to be World Press Freedom Day, or just World Press Day. That's how it is recognized worldwide. And so 3rd of May was the day that this was properly recognized or properly celebrated. But as the world gears up for another observance of World Press Freedom Day, it's imperative to move beyond speeches, hashtags, and ceremonial sloggering. Okay? In Nigeria, we have issues around press freedom where journalists walk in a thin line between duty and danger. Okay? So those are some of the issues we will be raising as it affects us. Now, like the media or hate the media, I know many people say one of the major problems we have in Nigeria is the media. Whether we're talking of social media, whether we're talking of traditional media, and all the other emerging media that we have. But the truth is, we have to talk about what are some of those things that are impeding on freedom, because that's why it is tagged World Press Freedom Day. Freedom is very important if a segment of or a sector like the press, would function effectively, especially in Nigeria. So we would just be talking around some of the issues or some of the things that we can pick out, especially as it has to do with press freedom in Nigeria. Now, there are a lot of constraints that media faces in Nigeria, no doubt about that. Okay, despite the fact that we have constitutional guarantees for freedom of expression and the press in Nigeria, it is there guaranteed in the Nigerian constitution. You cannot take away the fact that there is a whole lot that the press grapples with in Nigeria, and they are very significant issues. And most of the time, it's often exacerbated by the actions and inactions of different governments. And it's not just pinned down to one government, not just the previous, but government through government or administration through administration. We've often seen some of these issues exacerbated, brought to the fore, and has become a major conversation issue all across. We've seen situations whereby bills have been moved differently at different occasions championed by different legislators who are canvassing and pushing for the media to be gagged, some sort of, that media needs to be sort of controlled. And it's not a strange thing, because all across the world you see different governments and different countries trying to put some regulation in order to ensure that, yes, you can use the press or you can use the media very freely, but then at the same time you also have to be accountable. So I guess that's where proponents of some form of, okay, let's take this quick commercial and then come right back.
Right after this.
The Abuja Enterprise.
This is Nigeria Info.
For sustainable.
Hi everyone, my name is Swat. That's the name my father gave me, but you can always call me Her Vocal Majesty. I'm the host of The Sunny Side on 95.1 Nigeria Info. It takes place every weekday, noon to 3 p.m., where we get to have all the lovely contemporary conversations. If your days are normally long and gloomy, well, not anymore, because I'm here to make it all bright and sunny for you. So join me. It's an invitation. You don't want to miss out.
Connection established.
Right? Because there are boundaries that you can want to express your freedom and in the process harm other people. So the Constitution is very mindful about that, and that's why I guess in section 45, which allows for restriction in the interest of national security, public safety, and the rights of others. So where your rights start, another one's end, and another one where his own right starts, yours also ends. So it's a matter of knowing what the boundaries are. So as much as there's freedom of press, there's freedom of expression given and guaranteed to us by Section 39. Sorry, did I say 35 at first? It was 39 I meant to say. Of the 1999 Constitution, Section 45 also allows for some sort of restriction that comes in so that individuals and whoever it is protected in the country. Now, several laws dating back to the colonial era in Nigeria, such as, sedition and criminal defamation laws, have been used to intimidate and prosecute journalists, even though democratic principles favor the repeal of such restrictive legislation in Nigeria. Okay, we may not be able to go into that, but indeed, with the coming in of democracy, I was taking a course in journalism some times back, and I saw, the way it evolved somewhere in the United States, where how media, especially newspapers and all the rest, started evolving way back in the, I think, 16th century or something like that. Newspaper, how the transformation and evolving of newspaper, came from reporting everyday gossips, to reporting the wars, and then different genres of reporting came up, entertainment, etc, and all of that. But then there is one thing where I noticed, or something that I noticed in the course of that, it is the fact that the press is giving some sort of freedom to operate. At some point in time, it was there was this effort, or there was this move to actually gag the freedom and say, well, you know what, they shouldn't do this and that. But somehow it was repealed. So to a large extent, you find some sort of freedom given to media, to the press in different parts of the world, in the Western world, whereby as much as, of course, you have to be accountable, but to a very large extent, you are allowed to operate in a free way, or that which guarantees freedom of the press. We also have the Cybercrime Act in Nigeria, the Cybercrime Act of 2015, that has also been criticized in Nigeria for being used to target journalists and online media practitioners, with provision on cyber stalking and offensive messages being vaguely worded and subject to abuse. So that's one of the major issues that people and many stakeholders have had with the Cybercrime Act of 2015. You get to find out that there are some areas that are not so definite. And in fact, in many instances where people are arrested, such Cybercrime Act is what is often made a reference to. Now, many of the issues also that come to the fore when we talk about press freedom in Nigeria is censorship, right? Censorship. We all know at different times how some of these regulatory bodies have come in and have faced criticism based on slamming TV, radio houses, some serious fines, or once upon a time, it was so bad that you are not allowed to even hold some sort of conversations. If not, you will have to answer questions, or you'll be threatened with sanctions here and there. So that's part of it, that's gotten lots of stakeholders talking as to how free is the press in Nigeria. It's not as if we've gotten over that era. Maybe you might want to say with the going up of to court and people seeking for redress when it comes to some of those serious sanctions that is often slammed on media houses. We've seen probably a bit of reduction. It doesn't mean that we're completely free. And like I said at the beginning of this conversation, freedom is not doing as you want to do, because in so doing, you are not free. You are practicing something else, not freedom. Because freedom puts into consideration that other people's rights, people also have a right. So you don't use the media to come on social media or whether it's traditional media and just slam a lot of lies on people, slander, and a lot of other things like that. You would have to go and account for it. In that case, it's not about media or press freedom being gagged or freedom being gagged. It's about people carelessly using the media for mischief. And in that case, of course, you would have to account for that. Whether you are the one who's in charge or you are the one who's using whatever form of media to do that, right? So, censorship and some sort of intimidation that we've seen over the years, where security agencies have been frequently implicated in the harassment, arrest, and detention of some journalists over the years. For instance, in January 2025, security agencies were reportedly responsible for 57% of documented press freedom violation, including unlawful detention. Okay? That's part of the data that we have. And then also journalists covering sensitive issues like maybe corruption, human rights abuses, and political protests are particularly vulnerable to intimidations and attacks. I mean, we all have been privy and we have seen it in open glare, cases where people are covering some particular sensitive things, where you see security agencies seizing whether cameras, slapping journalists. Some have taken that up to court. And in so many instances, some unlawful detention that have to do with daring to report on certain areas that are considered quite sensitive. And these are part of the issues that we're talking about when it comes to press freedom in Nigeria. Also, the economic part of it is also there, where it is said that people in the media are often not paid that well, So it exposes or allows such ones, media practitioners, journalists, to become exposed to some sort of gratification that may not allow them practice their profession with the highest standards, because you have that element whereby in the absence of scarcity, and then you are being offered or being gratified in such a way that you cannot resist it due to the economic hardship that is prevalent. That in itself also impedes on having some sort of freedom to report as one ought to report, because there are a lot of factors mitigating against that. You also have government ownership of or significant influence over media organizations, which can lead to, some sort of self-censorship. And this, relates closely to what we're saying about you have government bodies that are in charge of regulating censorship, etc. So you find out that you're being warned, hey, don't you dare write on this topic, leave it, because we don't want some people in high places, the high and mighty, to be offended. We don't want to risk our media houses being shut. We don't want to risk being starved of funds or advertisements that would, impede our progress and stuff like that. So these are some stuff, some real issues on ground whereby the influence of government censorship or even ownership plays a very significant influence over a media organization, which leads to self-censorship, where journalists and editors avoid reporting critical areas in terms of government or in governance and politics and so on and so forth. Then also, the lack of funds when it comes to advertisement. So funding for some of this media organization also serves as the impediment to press freedom in Nigeria. Okay, now, it's no news that journalists in Nigeria, have over the years faced a lot of threats. I mean, we can give example by the finger. of how in times past and in not so in recent times, how journalists have had to be arrested, detained. Sometimes, in extreme cases, we have also heard of the disappearance of some, and up until date, we're still wondering what happened to them. A typical example is the case of Dadiata in Kaduna, where this man just disappeared, and up until now, people are asking. I'm sure his family is still wondering what happened, So these are some of the cases that scares others from traversing certain areas or wanting to do some certain things, carrying on some certain exploits in this particular field. When you see what is happening, when they say when you see your neighbor's bed is on fire, you have to go and ensure that you put water on yours, right? Or when your neighbor's house is on fire, you also have to take precaution. So basically, you can't take away the fact that when something very terrible or ill happens to your colleague, it sort of causes others to develop cold feet in their bid to freely reporting some issues. Social media too is still a major thing in Nigeria. I mean, recently it was said that social media is the terrorist in Nigeria. And as much as, yes, social media has its own ills, and many have canvassed for the regulation that would make people use social media responsibly, the need to also maintain freedom for people to express themselves responsibly. And I'm one person who also advocates for the fact that we need to use our platforms responsibly. You cannot just come and be a purveyor of fake news. You cannot be someone who would just start putting out things that are false, deliberately misinforming people, or picking up on individuals that you have some sort of grouse with, and then you use your platform and you want to just, throw out some slanderous thing. You have that to answer. For. So as much as we're canvassing for responsible use of social media, but at the same time, people who are pushing out for regulation of social media, or people in Nigeria, I often wonder to what extent, when you say we should not allow press freedom, to what extent? Because we've seen extreme cases. So that's why people are very skeptical, very, very skeptical when it comes to whether it's the legislative arm saying we need to ensure that we put out an act that regulates the use of social media. To what extent is that going to be? Because if we've seen arrest, gagging, some fines being slammed, some kind of extreme situations happen, then how are we sure that when Nigerians just fold? I guess that's why, when this sort of things come out, you get to see CSOs, you get to see individuals, stakeholders say, we are saying no to this because we know the history as is contained or is within our own context or within our own Nigerian experience. So, for example, during the military era, right, from the 1966 of this world, it is said that successive military regimes were notoriously hostile to the press. They often employed arbitrary anti-press decrees, harassment, arrest, detention of journalists, and the prescription of media houses. That was just what was very obtainable back in the day when military held sway in ruling this country. That was it. You can go check history and see, read with a lot of stories of journalists. One prominent example that we can give, of course, is the Dele Giwa of this world, who died in unexplainable circumstances. They say he received a letter and boom, that was it, a letter bomb or whatever it is they call it. You can give 1,001 examples of journalists who had to lose their lives, who had to stay long in detention and stuff like that. So from the military, even down to when we came back to democracy, from 1999, even during the Olusegun Obasanjo administration, while the civilian rule was celebrated, people who celebrated, it sort of brought some sort of respite for press freedom. I mean, at least that's what people thought, that, at last, this is what we fought for. This is where we're in now. So we expect a whole lot. But there were instances of journalists that were harassed or arrested, and the government was sometimes accused of using its influence to control the narrative in state-owned media, which is one of the issues that we've brought to the fore. Also, in the last administration, from 2015 to about 2023, despite initial promises of upholding press freedom, the last administration, it faced lots of criticism for its handling of the media, and there were numerous reports of arrests, detentions, intimidation of journalists, and the Cybercrime Act was frequently cited as a tool used against the press, particularly online journalists and bloggers. And reports indicated a rise in press freedom violations during this period. Okay, so we are in this era too, and it's not without its own issues that we can point to as to questions regarding press freedom. Concerns about press freedom have continued right to where we are right now. Within the first 6 months of the Tinubu presidency, numerous cases of press freedom violations, including some arrests and so on, have been reported. But on the overall, we can do so much better as a country, when it comes to press freedom, whether it's the traditional social media. So that's just a little, with regards to press freedom in Nigeria and how we can ensure that we do better as a country with allowing the press to function and to thrive in its place. After all, the press is known as the fourth realm of the estate, and it keeps government of the day accountable. So when you want to, through whether policies or legislative, pieces and all of that, try to bring some sort of restriction or try to gag it, then it becomes problematic for any society. So having said that, I would love to know what your own take and your own perspective is on press freedom in Nigeria. You can talk to me on what more we can do to make it better for the press to operate freely and fairly too, because we cannot just talk about freedom without the responsible use of media. And then also ethical practices when it comes to journalism. We want to avoid sensationalism. We want to avoid a point where journalists are used as stooges. That's where I talked about the economic factor, where many people are at the mercy of some people who just hand them some very fat brown envelopes and so change the narrative, which goes counter to what, the profession stands for. So 0700 951 0000 and 080 95 974869. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon, Swat.
Yes, good afternoon.
My name is Mike when wind blows.
You're welcome.
Yeah. As I listened to you carefully, I thought you will omit one very, very key aspect, but you mentioned it toward the end when you talk about censorship and ownership of media houses. I want to dwell mostly on ownership.
Okay.
So what I remember vividly, when an owner of one of the foremost independent or privately owned media house in this country some years ago was having some battles with a bank loan that he owned, and they were threatening to seize his license.
Okay.
The man came up to say, look, before giving me this license, there are rules they gave me to abide by not being partisan or participating in partisan politics, which I agree. Do you get? Mm-hmm. And so for you to say for the bank to come unilaterally and say, okay, because I'm owing you, you want to seize my license, which I forgo certain rights, certain privileges before they give me this license, say it's not doable. But today, check ownership of media houses and their involvement in politics. Although the same man who made this statement during the Dasuki Gate, we saw how much got to him as to like you talk about as an advert or whatever. Swat, the media houses in Nigeria cannot function as we expect because of that. This issue of ownership, who they say he who plays the pipe dictates the tone. Who really owns them, or who is financing them? Which advice are they getting from government of the day for them to be able to talk very well as they're supposed to talk? Sometimes when we talk about media or journalists collecting brown envelope, maybe because of the order that is open to or common to the people, because when they go to press conferences. But the owners of these media houses themselves, like I mentioned, Dasuki Gate, we hear how many media houses collect hundreds of millions of naira from Dasuki. Don't we hear?
Yeah.
So tell me, how can such media houses say what it is as engaging governance? I'm also happy when you mentioned Obasanjo in 1999 when he was doing all those presidential media chat. So I can tell you for free or whoever cares to listen, there are no go areas. There are questions you can't ask Mr. President if you are before him as a journalist. So what kind of media chat is that? What kind of presidential media chat is that?
It's not even back then. Even up to now, when you want to interview some people, they'll tell you to send questions and all of that, you know.
Exactly.
So you don't traverse some particular areas.
Swat, I beg, 1 second there. Go listen to the speech, the farewell speech Obama made with the press crew he worked with as president of America. He told them sometimes they ask him one 5-pronged question in one. And in his effort to answer them, they call him orator and all of that. And he told them, look, he wasn't angry with them because they are doing their job. But in Nigeria, look at what happened in Calabar, FFK, when the journalists asked him who is shooting your tour. He began to insult him. Who bankrolled your tour? He began to insult him. Is that a bad question? And the journalist who doesn't know himself was apologizing, sorry, sir. For what? For asking you a question? And then why am I there?
Indeed. All right. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. Like I said, too many examples that you can point to. I mean, what happened, what was it between, which minister was that and a journalist from Arise TV, if you remember that incident too. So you see a lot of harassment. Sometimes when you interview some of these people, you know, they turn and start attacking you. You're not even a journalist. You go and get your facts right. You know, these things. Anyway, it's part of it. I mean, and part of the training is they tell you to still maintain your cool and insist on the question being answered without actually, you know, going down that path. But a lot of intimidation that causes some people to either refrain from going into the terrain because of fear of what may become of them and their family, or, you know, they just cower down once some good money is given in their hand and it just shuts them forever. So these are issues. They are challenges, honestly. I think the economic factor is one thing that is really, really mitigating. Like you were saying, Mr. Mike, if you don't have the adverts, you know, and you have a staff to pay, do you really sometimes even blame how some of these media owners hobnob with some politicians and are forced not to report the way they ought to because of the economic factor involved? You know what I'm saying, right? Hello.
Hello, Barrister Swat. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. Barrister, when you talk about arrest of some journalists and other intimidation, what can you remember? You don't know if today we begin to follow your program. I really went in that place. There has been some sort of harassment for years. I didn't lie.
I know, you're not lying, no. We've had our fair share. We've had our fair share of these things. So.
We don't know who to follow you. So I know what I'm saying. But the truth of the matter is this. I don't know. I want to ask this question. Do even these journalists themselves, during time of induction, do they actually swear like oaths, swear them in like to discharge my duty with neither fear nor favor? So if that is the case, some of them, sorry to say this thing, they speak from all sides of their mouth, from two sides of their mouths. And at the same time, you know, when you are promoting a topic here, like some of your ardent listeners, where you put comma, where you put semicolon, full stop, even question mark, including the one that is rhetorical in nature, we take note because I listen attentively. Now, when you, in the course of your program and people begin to twist some issues, people will take note. Why? Is it because integrity is what you watch what, and people look up to you and will take interest because you have always been yourself. A lot of the journalists themselves, some of them are not even being themselves. Let me give you a typical example. Before this promulgation or before this declaration of state of emergency in Rivers State, a certain journalist in TVC, you know who owns TVC, he has always been on the side of the people, reporting from the military, background. He was promoting, he was saying that very 24 hours before that state of emergency, he was saying that no president have any right to, declare state of emergency in any part of this country. He was saying that in very 24 hours, state of emergency was declared in Rivers State. He now comes to say that there was a law that has not been repealed of 1964. tell me, those who are listening to this guy, how do we now begin to see this individual? You see what we are passing through? It's not just only the media owners, including the employees. You may say, yes, this is an economic factor, but there are some people inside their blood. The greediness can actually make people. That's why even anything that will make me to even encourage my ward or my child to go into journalism, I look up to somebody. If somebody wants SWAT, I'm not trying to patronize you. I look at Profile the Fire. When you are doing your journalism, add a little bit of activism to it. It is not a crime. And let people know you for who you are. Not somebody that will always make issues to suit your whatever your heart desire is.
All right.
You understand?
Thank you,
Mr.
very much.
All right.
Appreciate. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Adela Victor from Visa Lagos.
Okay, welcome.
You see, there's nowhere, there's no country that has paper press freedom because, as a matter of fact, there must be restriction and limitation. Because we human beings, at times, we have to be controlled, especially when we are talking about government or we are talking about economic. There are some things that people should not see, and there are some that people should see. Especially now, look at the program, this program that at times you tell us that there are some languages that are not legal worthy that we not see. So this is part of the measures to cope people so that they will not come out here and start to abuse people or start to involve in things that are not palatable. For instance, now look at what happened in Rwanda during the 1993 genocide. It was the press that caused that genocide. Look at the number of millions of people that were there. So therefore, there's a need, even though in advanced democracy, they put in measure to shake people and to shake people because it also a lot of things will happen. Look at what is happening in Nigeria now. Look at the social media. Look at how people are doing social media. As a matter of fact, I am one of the people advocates. Yeah, because people have misused it and caused a lot of problems.
Hello.
For the press to be controlled. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Adela. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
I'm proud to say that I'm a journalist. In the line of the critics has encountered I would say encountered one of the cases I thought I would say this. I don't want to go into that way.
Mr. Emeka, as usual, your line, I don't know what is wrong with your line. No. Can you record a voice note? I think your voice recordings are clearer. Sorry, we have to take a commercial.
It is an incontrovertible fact that the future of power is solar. It is becoming increasingly clear that solar is...
This is Nigeria Info.